Time now for my big interview with heavyweight US conservative commentator Ben Shapiro. Ben is currently editor-in-chief of the hugely popular Daily Wire website and the presenter of the world-renowned Ben Shapiro Show. He's also an Orthodox Jew who's had plenty to say on the Hamas atrocities in Israel. Here's what he told me earlier in our Westminster studio. Shapiro, how divided is America in response to this terror attack on Israel?
Right now, the polls are showing not a lot of division, actually. There was a poll from CNN that came out this morning that showed that well in excess of two-thirds of Americans are in favor of Israel defending itself. The number of Americans who believe that Israel should not be defending itself or taking the action that it's taking in the Gaza Strip is high single digits, low double digits. Perhaps there are divisions by age. Younger Americans tend to be more pro-Palestinian than older Americans. And younger Americans also tend to be under the misimpression that Hamas was not deliberately targeting civilians at a larger rate than older Americans. But overall, the American people are very squarely behind Israel in the current conflict.
Can you conflate support for Palestine with support for Hamas?
I think it's possible to separate them. I'm just going to note that a lot of the people who should be separating them are conflating them. So, sure, you can say there ought to be a Palestinian state, that in the best of all possible worlds, that there would be a two-state solution. What you cannot do is protest in favor of Hamas and then suggest that you are separate from the Palestinian cause while flying a Palestinian flag. I mean, one of the things that I'm noting is that it's not a lot of Palestinian moderate advisors or Palestinian so-called moderate supporters who are condemning Hamas. There's been a rather deafening silence from that quarter. Again, is it possible logically to separate those things? Of course. Has that separation been effectuated in practice? I'm not seeing the evidence.
Why do the left have such difficulty in condemning this terror attack on Israel, the biggest single attack on Jewish people since the end of the Holocaust? I
think fairly simply, the left internationally has been anti-Israel since the 1967 war. But more broadly speaking, right now, the left has become a quote-unquote coalition of dispossessed oriented against traditional institutions. And that holds true in America. It holds true in Britain. It holds true in Israel as well. And so the idea is that Israel is some sort of colonial outpost of Western civilization and that it has, quote-unquote, dispossessed the Palestinians, and thus any sort of decolonization effort up to and including the slaughter of innocent babies in their cribs is thus justified. And that's sort of the justification that you're seeing these days. It's hideous and it's ugly, but unfortunately that is what you're seeing.
How far do you think America will support Israel in their objective of eliminating Hamas?
Yeah, I would hope all the way. I think it's in the world's interest and in America's interest for Israel to eliminate Hamas. And I frankly don't think that Israel has much of a choice but to do so. After 1,300 Jews were murdered, and others, by the way, a lot of Israeli Arabs, Druze, like a lot of people were murdered, and 200 hostages were taken. No country worth its salt would allow the entity responsible for that to continue operating, let alone to remain in control of a swath of land like the Gaza Strip. I think America is likely to rearm and resupply Israel. And I think America and virtually every other party, including Israel, has an interest in the conflict being contained to just between Israel and Hamas, as opposed to a northern front opening from Hezbollah or Iran entering and this turning into a regional or possibly worldwide conflagration.
Indeed. Now, anti-Semitism, sadly, Ben, is a given in the Middle East. But do you think we've seen more of it than we might have expected in the West in the last 7 days? In London, for example, we've had pro-Palestinian marches in which some awfully anti-Semitic language has been used.
Yeah, I'm certainly shocked by the extent to which that sort of reaction has been prevalent. And you started to see mass protests in favor of Hamas, not against Israel, in favor of Hamas very early on. We're talking by like October 8th, October 9th in a lot of these public centers and American universities. And the jump to the conclusion that the blood of Israeli babies is somehow on Jewish hands. Simultaneously, you've seen a mass propaganda effort to blame the Hamas, to blame civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip, not on Hamas, which is actually attempting to shield its own terrorists with civilians. I mean, they literally built tunnel networks under civilian areas to this purpose, but to blame that on Israel as well. I'm bewildered by it. I'm shocked by it. I don't know a Jew who isn't, certainly, or an Israel supporter who isn't. I mean, this is the clearest cut case of an immoral massacre in recent human rights history. And yet there seems to be a fairly solid base of support for the proposition that kids murdered in their own beds, women raped and kidnapped, that all of that is acceptable so long as it's directed against Jews.
Indeed, perhaps not surprising that college students in America have been called out for either supporting Hamas or being very proactively supportive of Palestine after this awful attack on Jewish people.
That's right. I mean, listen, everyone has a right to speak freely in the United States and to take whatever awful position they want to take in the United States. Also, no business has a duty to hire anybody who supports a terrorist group.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Listen, can Hamas be eliminated, and how long might it take?
It's unclear to what extent Hamas can, quote unquote, be eliminated. If by the leadership of Hamas we're talking Hamas, then sure, the leadership of Hamas can be and will be eliminated by Israel. As far as the forces that led to the rise of Hamas and to the continued control of Hamas, that's going to be a broader proposition, because a lot of Hamas's ideas, a lot of its genocidal concepts have been embedded in Palestinian education, not just in the Gaza Strip, but also in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. They've been embedded there for decades at this point. The Palestinian Authority didn't launch this attack, but the Palestinian Authority does have funds that are provided to the families of terrorists. Islamic Jihad, which is the other governing power in the West Bank, is an actual terrorist group along the lines of Hamas. So, again, this is an intractable problem that's not going to be solved with one military intervention. Hamas can be deposed. The question as to what comes after in the Gaza Strip is going to be a very difficult one to answer for Israel and for the rest of the world. Is
President Joe Biden equipped to handle this crisis?
I mean, I think that, frankly, Joe Biden is not equipped to handle pretty much anything at this point. His response so far has been what it ought to be, in the sense that he's put 2 American aircraft carriers off the coast of the Mediterranean in an attempt to dissuade Hezbollah from firing on Israel and getting into the war, opening a second front. He's providing the military resupply for Israel, and he's speaking some nice words. It would have been nice if he had not funded Hamas funded Iran to the tune of billions of dollars. And also, by the way, yes, funded Hamas via Palestinian aid in the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of his administration. That sort of weakness tends to lead to aggression in the Middle East, not to gratitude and conciliation.
Last but not least, Ben, is this moment an existential moment for the state of Israel?
Certainly. It is absolutely an existential moment for the state of Israel. Literally everyone in Israel, right to left, understands that, which is why everyone is so unified in the state of Israel. They understand that even if Hamas does not have the unilateral capacity to destroy Israel, they understand that if Israel does not destroy Hamas, then the threats to Israel on the northern border from a significantly more powerful Hezbollah will only grow, that the threats in the West Bank from the Palestinian Authority, Islamic Jihad, that those will only grow, that the threats from Iran via Syria and Lebanon are only going to grow. In the Middle East, strength is pretty much the only thing that matters, and the impression that Israel is an impregnable fortress has been obviously pierced. Israel has to reestablish that impression in very, very short order if they wish to maintain a durable presence in the Middle East.
Ben, a privilege to have you on the show. We will obviously give our viewers details of how to watch your brilliant program on the Daily Wire, and thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
And let me do that right now. You can catch Ben Shapiro on The Ben Shapiro Show Monday to Friday at thedailywire.com.